If, like me, you grew up in the 90s playing Gran Turismo on the PlayStation, you would know that most of your performance heroes from back then are now dead and gone. We haven't had a new Mitsubishi Evo for over 10 years now, and while the Nissan GT-R is technically still alive, I think it's barely hanging on. I just don't know how long Nissan can keep flogging that dead horse anymore. We do have a new Toyota Supra, yes, but yeah, while it's a good car and all, you know it's just a shell of its former self. But this one, however, the Subaru WRX, it's still as good as we know it from before. This is still a high-performance, road-going rally car, hood scoop and all. So let's see what this 2023 version of the Rex is all about. First things first, let's talk about the prices. This here goes for 296,000 ringgit here in Malaysia, as is with a CVT transmission. But even more interestingly, you can also choose a 6-speed manual or even a wagon version of this car. And better yet, if you choose either the manual or the wagon, it's actually cheaper at 286,000 ringgit. So first of all, we have to say a big thank you to Subaru Malaysia for keeping this car alive and well, and also offering manual and wagon versions. So those of you who have been living by the same old tired line, you know, if it came with a manual, I'd buy one in a heartbeat. Now's the time to put your money where your mouth is. Ada beranda? Well, anyway, this technically is the 5th generation Subaru WRX, and it really is all new. It's got the Subaru Global platform underneath, it's an all-new skin on the outside, it's a new engine as well. This really is an all-new 2023 WRX, a World Rally Experimental. We'll sidestep the fact that Subaru has not been competing in the WRC since 2008. I'm just still glad that the car like this still exists today. On a sadder note, Subaru has already confirmed that there will not be a higher performance STI version of this model. All the pesky fuel efficiency and emissions regulations have really made that car irrelevant in this day and age. So if you want to buy a fast Subaru, this is the one to get. There's no need to wait anymore. I guess that's a good thing as well. In the market, the Rex doesn't really have a natural competition anymore. As I've said, the Mitsubishi Evo is long dead. Now, the only car that is even remotely comparable to this would be the Mercedes-AMG A35 sedan. But you know what? I can't genuinely think that anybody would be cross-shopping between the two cars. The appeal and the pedigree are just worlds apart. And then you've also got the Volkswagen Golf R, which is also turbocharged, also all-wheel drive, but again, completely different target markets. And here in Malaysia, the Volkswagen is also around 100,000 ringgit more expensive. I think I'd rather go with this. The only car that this can really be compared to would be the Toyota GR Corolla. But again, imagine this. Anybody asks what car you drive, with this you can say, oh, Subaru or a WRX, a Rex, whereas in the other car, it's a Corolla. Nowhere near as exciting, is it? Now let's move on to the most controversial part of this car. For the 5th generation, the WRX has been turned into a bit of a crossover sedan. It's got full black body cladding all around the car. And I'll be honest, the first time I saw the car in photos, I thought, what the hell has Subaru done to the Rex? That's not the car I used to know and love. But you know what, having seen it in the flesh, yeah, I'll admit it takes a bit of getting used to, but once you get used to the look, I kind of like it. This looks really good, really unique, sporty. I wouldn't have it any other way. I think people just have the habit of underappreciating Subaru styling of its time. If you remember the old WRX version 7, you know, the old blob-eyed version, when it was new, everybody thought that was the ugliest thing that Subaru could have designed. But you see one today in good condition and man, that's such a good looking car. Keyboard warriors say a lot of things about this car. The rear end looks like a Beza, the entire car looks like an XV sedan on stilts, and they always say one thing as well. This car looks nothing like the concept, and the concept looks so much better. But the last point, you know what? If you look at the 2017 Subaru Visif Performance concept, put this side by side, and I think it looks really close. I remember distinctly when that concept came out, everybody was saying, now that looks like a proper Rex. Now just wait till the new version comes out, it'll look nothing like this, it'll be too watered down. But this time, Subaru has actually done it. It actually looks like the concept, and still people say it looks ugly. You just can't win with the internet. Now at the back, I can sort of see the passing resemblance to a Pro Dua Beza, but up close, in the metal, the cars look nothing alike, to be honest. I especially like the prominent rear wheel arches and the way the rear taillights stick out so much. It sort of gives it that aftermarket wide body look, which I really like. Speaking of the taillights, you do have a bit of a shattered glass effect on the inner lens, which I think looks really good, although there are quite a few things that are not that great on this car. For instance, the boot lid spoiler over here does look a little bit too short, a bit unfinished, I think. And then the rear bumper, the full black plastic body cladding, just looks a little bit too big, a bit too thick in the back here. If you look up close, the plastic bits have a bit of a honeycomb pattern on it. Subaru says that this actually aids the aero of this car. It cuts through the air better with the pattern on. It sort of works like the dimples on a golf ball. It's one of those nerdy but interesting things that Subaru is really good at. Other than that, the brakes on this car look a little bit boring. I think the least they could have done is to paint the calipers. But other than that, this looks like a proper performance car, especially with a quad exhaust in the back. It's just so sad that this car doesn't sound anything like how you'd expect a WRX to sound like. Just listen to this. That just sounds like a boring old XV, doesn't it? That is so disappointing. One thing though, if you really cannot live with the thick body cladding look of the sedan, you should take a look at the wagon instead. That has much cleaner, much classier lines, and of course, you get the more unique body style as well. Me, now that I get the high-riding rally car look of the sedan, I much prefer this over the wagon. What do you think? Which one do you prefer? Let me know in the comments below. As much as I like the exterior of this car, the interior is a bit disappointing, I think, because if you minus off a few of the WRX specific items, this just looks and feels like any other new Subaru. Even the parts that are specific to this car are just very minor things, like this badge under the steering wheel with a really ugly carbon fiber print at that, and the seats having WRX stitching in red. The rest of the car, I could be sitting in the new XV for all I know. But then again, that's just the way it has always been for the WRX. Even in earlier days, the most hardcore version, the ones that would be faster than a Ferrari, had the same exact dashboard as a humble base Impreza. It's just tradition, I guess. The new bits taken in isolation do feel quite good. The aircon vents feel nice and premium, the screen is definitely big, but as a whole, this doesn't quite feel like a properly modern interior. This is not that far of a leap forward compared to the standard old school interior that you can find in current Subarus. And then you get to the build quality, which for the most part is pretty good. The top half is all nice and soft touch. You've got a proper leather layer over here until you get to the top parts over here. Well, these are all nice and soft touch. These two are all hard to the touch. I just don't get why they couldn't put the same material on the top two covers over here. It just cheapens the whole car a lot, I think. And then there's a center console over here, nice leather padding as well. But you try to push it with your knees and the whole thing just moves. Doesn't inspire confidence, does it? But that's just me being an anal car reviewer. I think if you're a normal person jumping into this car, you will like it a lot. The big screen does look good, a lot of flashy, colorful details, and it has full screen Apple CarPlay as well, although it is wired, as you can see over here, with no wireless charging pad either. Even the USB ports are the old school USB-A types instead of USB-Cs. But as a whole, this is still a very usable cabin with very familiar controls. You've got physical buttons to control your temperature over here, proper volume knob as well, although the aircon fan controls are embedded within the screen over here, but I think that's not such a bad thing. It's always there, so yeah, even when you're driving, is right within reach. Other than that, the seats are just supremely comfortable and supportive, easily one of the better seats I've sat on over the past 5-10 years. These just hug you in all the right places, and it's functional as well. The front passenger seat even has a small airbag on the base of it here to stop the front passenger from sliding forward in a major accident. It's a unique feature that only Subarus have right now. And that brings the total number of airbags to 8, including a knee airbag for the driver as well. One thing to note is that while the CVT version does have an electronic parking brake, as you can see over here, if you get the 6-speed manual version, that will come with a handy handbrake as standard. And one last thing that I don't like about the car are the side aircon vents over here. Just like the Iris, as you drive along, the aircon vent just blows directly to your left hand. So yeah, your left hand will get a bit cold, a bit frozen over longer runs. As for the rear seats, it is very decent with a lot of legroom and a lot of toe room as well. Although headroom isn't that great. I am only 167 centimeters tall for your reference, and sitting up straight, my hair is almost touching the ceiling. If you're any taller, yeah, you might not be able to fit in the back here as comfortably as I can. Having said that, the seats again are nowhere near as comfortable as the ones in front, as you can imagine, but I really do like this Alcantara finish on the rear bench as well. Other than that, you do have rear aircon vents for the first time on the WRX, although this is only available on the CVT version of this car. If you get the manual, somehow you don't get any rear vents either. A bit of a shame, I think. And one last bit of warning, if you're seated in the back and the driver in front is flinging the car around aggressively, you may want to watch out for your head from knocking the side wall over here. Can be a bit painful if you're not careful. As for the boot, you get a very decent 410-litre load space, and of course you can fold the rear seats down to fit in longer items. But if you're thinking of fitting big items all the time, you should just consider the estate or wagon version instead. Alright guys, now comes the exciting part of reviewing a Subaru WRX Proper Rex, the actual driving portion of it. Now up front, let's talk about the engine. This is a brand new engine, a 2.4 litre 4-cylinder boxer engine, turbocharged as well of course. So that's quite a big jump from the old engine, a 2.4 engine versus a 2 litre one, a big 20% increase in terms of cubic capacity. But having said that, the power outputs are a little bit disappointing because you now get 275 PS, which is just like a handful more than before, while the torque figure 350 Newton meters is exactly the same as before. Yeah, somehow with a much bigger engine, you've ended up at pretty much similar levels of output as before. Yeah, how did they get there? Well, actually the answer is very simple. Despite having a much bigger engine, check out that car right there, that's really cool. Anyway, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Despite the much bigger engine, the turbo boost has actually been dialed down. So yeah, bigger engine, lower turbo boost, end up similar levels of power as before. But you know what, this car actually does feel a lot better compared to before. Now the old WRXs, especially the STI versions, had a bit of a turbo lag issue. You are cruising along, you plant your foot down, and it takes a bit of time for the turbo to spool up, and then you get a big kick on your back. Now the kick is a really big one, but it takes a bit of time to get there. This one, yeah, you just plant your foot down and off you go. The response is just far better with this new engine compared to before. Now, there's a few things that aid the new engine in terms of the turbo lag, in terms of responses of it. Now, first of all, being a much bigger engine to begin with, even at low revs, you have a lot more power to push the car along, to generate enough boost pressure, enough exhaust pressure to spin the turbos around, and then to give you that big kick. It's like having a lot more muscle to begin with a much bigger engine. And then theoretically, with a lower boost clock, this is now an understressed engine. Theoretically, it should be a lot more reliable in the long run. Plus, you can just as easily boost the turbo pressures back up to the normal levels, and then theoretically again you can get more power than before. So yes, while on paper you get similar levels of power output, same torque, but to drive, this actually feels like a big step up from before. Even the torque curve, pardon the jump right there, this is a rally car after all. Anyway, the spread of torque is actually much wider than before. At low revs, this feels far more responsive, far less turbo laggy, if there's such a word. While at higher revs, this just feels far more responsive. You immediately get that big kick in the back with this one. Now, ultimately, the performance is rather similar to the previous car. This 0 to 100 is claimed to be done in about 6.1 seconds, while I've timed it at no quicker than 6.4, 6.5 seconds. So that's a little bit disappointing, I would say, because I guess in our heads we're just so used to this old school STIs, old school Evos doing, 5 seconds or less from 0 to 100. The newer, the modern versions are quite a bit heavier than before. Blame emissions, safety requirements and all that. So yeah, a little bit slower. 6 seconds is not a slow car by any means, but it's not a groundbreaking crazy sports car either. Now let's talk about the transmission, because yes, this still does have a CVT, but don't tune off just yet, because you know what, this is easily one of the best implementations of CVTs just yet. This is a Subaru performance tuned CVT gearbox, and it's absolutely fantastic. Just flick your foot down and it just jumps forward. The response is just so immediate, you'd think you're driving a manual gearbox. Well, you know what? No, this is much quicker than a manual gearbox. There's just no way you can just pump your clutch, change gears and go forward. This is just a quicker car overall. So yes, don't give up hope on this car just because it has a CVT. If you give it a try, I think you will be very impressed. And I'm not talking in a way how a Pro Duo CVT will impress you in terms of its refinement, in terms of its driving response and all that. This is a genuinely high performance transmission. This actually feels like a really sporty car to drive, and that's because of the transmission, not despite of it. This, to me, in most instances, feels even more sporty than the quickest shifting DSGs, the dual clutch transmissions. This just feels quicker, this feels more responsive, this feels more immediate. It may be a CVT by name, but you wouldn't think it's a CVT as you drive along. Even when you accelerate hard, it doesn't just hang on a single rev at the top. It will move up and down the rev range as well. It is that good. It simulates an 8-speed automatic transmission, but it feels even better than that. And hey, even if you don't believe me at all, you can still get a traditional 6-speed manual gearbox with this car. So you know what, you really cannot go wrong with this new Rex. The one thing that is just a massive disappointment is the lack of sound in this car. You'd expect coming into a Subaru WRX with a Boxer 4 engine, you really come to expect that low burble coming from the engine. With this car, you get absolutely nothing. I've been in, a 4-cylinder Mercedes that sounds louder than this. Just listen to this. Full throttle, 5,000 RPM, 6,000 RPM, red line shift. Absolutely nothing. All you hear is a lot of wind noise, but literally zero engine noise, no exhaust noise either. How the hell did Subaru end up with having a car that's so refined as this? I mean, refinement's great. I love talking about how refined, this car and that car is, but we're talking about a high performance so-called rally car here. I mean, come on. I need a bit of sound, Subaru. Moving on from that disappointing note, see what I did there? Let's talk about the fuel efficiency here. Now, you wouldn't think that this car being such a high performance kind of rally cross car, you wouldn't think it would have a really good fuel consumption, and it doesn't. This car, through a couple of 100 kilometers, I've averaged just 12 liters per 100 kilometers. That's not really great. It's far less than 10 kilometers per liter. But then again, if you take into account the level of performance that this car offers, the level of joy that the driver feels, I think that's a decent enough fuel economy that this car offers. I don't think it's any better than the old 2-liter engine. If anything, if I remember correctly, that was probably a bit more efficient than this one. But yeah, probably it's the bigger engine, probably it's the slightly heavier weight. Yeah, this is slightly thirstier than before. But then again, this is still far more economical than the old school Rexes, the old school Evos from before. You know the stories, those things will do 15, 20 liters per 100 kilometers depending on how hard you drive it. This one, even with a few, aggressive, spirited driving with a bit of traffic jam, I still average 12 liters per 100, which is not too bad, I guess. Another big advantage of the new engine is the lower compression ratio. So now the engine can run comfortably on RON 95 fuel. That's lower running costs overall, definitely a good thing. Now let's move on to the ride and handling of this car. If anything, this feels like a much more mature car compared to the older, old school Rexes from before. The old cars, they feel exactly as would expect from a PlayStation era kind of car. They ride as hard as a skateboard. It's just a really big kick in the butt as you come onto the straights, but through the curves, yeah, it's a bit of a handful, those cars. This feels far more planted, far well balanced than, say, a Mercedes A35 AMG. Now, that, I guess, it just chased the traditional sports car feel way too much. You ended up with a ride that's far too stiff. This rides really high because, it's a rally car. You need to deal with the jumps and the big gravel roads and whatnot. So you've got a lot more suspension travel with this car. And overall, it feels really, really good. This is a car, like I said, you can drive every single day without feeling like it's too much of a compromise, like it's too much of a sacrifice. I don't think your wife, your kids will complain anywhere near as much in this car compared to like a Golf R or an A35 AMG. Yeah, it's hard to imagine a Subaru being more comfortable than a Mercedes, but in this case, it certainly is. And then you've got the handling as well, and you know what? Subaru's nailed it this time. This feels very, very well balanced. And whether you're driving slow, whether you're driving it fast on a highway or even really twisty roads, they've got a really nice balance with this car. The steering is absolutely fantastic. One of the more lively cars I've driven in recent years. This has a permanent all-wheel drive version, but with the CVT, it actually gives more power to the rear wheels for a bit of a rear biased balance. And yeah, it really feels as good as you can ever think of for a performance Subaru. With this car, you can really dance it around through corners, going up Genting, back down. It feels really good. Very planted, very stable, and it even feels safe as well. You don't have that, tinge of danger like you used to in the older cars. The older cars used to wash a little bit wide if you're not careful with the corner entry. This one, you can really push it through, and it feels fantastic. I haven't had this much fun driving any car for quite a long time. Even my favorite performance cars of recent times, the Mercedes A45 AMG, that felt nowhere near as dynamic or as organic as this one. This feels like a properly physical, properly mechanical kind of car. It's just, if you can't tell, I absolutely love driving this thing. Now, last thing before we wrap up, we're going to talk about the eyesight system, the active safety systems on this car. Unfortunately, you don't get eyesight if you buy the manual version, but if you get the CVT version, you get the entire full suite of eyesight 4.0, the very latest version. So with this, you get autonomous emergency braking, you've got adaptive cruise control, level 2 semi-autonomous driving, blind spot monitor, rear cross traffic alert, everything you'd want really, and it's technically one of the better systems out there. Out on the highway, you press the self-drive button, and this will keep to the center of the lane than say a Honda Civic will. This has a slightly more advanced driver tracking system, but then again, this is a Rex. You get into it, you really want to drive it. I don't think an autonomous driving system would have a lot of use in a car like this, but as a safety feature, the AEB and all that is great to have, of course. So that's my full review of the 2023 Subaru WRX. In short, I think this car is every bit as good as you'd wish a car like this to be. Sure, it's not that much faster than before, but I think if you're looking for a car like this, you would truly appreciate the extra tuning potential of this new engine. Just remember, the first thing you should do is put on a proper set of exhaust, because the stock system sounds absolutely rubbish. As it is, it's got plenty of usable performance, and while the ride is firm, it's not overly harsh like a lot of performance cars are these days. This I can live with every single day. And then the best part of it all, the handling of this car. It's so enjoyable out on the roads, on the highways, on back roads, and on track as well, I'm sure. This is the car that you can enjoy all year long through all kinds of roads. With the latest WRX, you can finally buy your 90s performance hero brand new, with warranty, and most important of all, with a bank loan as well. Trust me, just ignore all the internet haters and you can have a ball of a time driving this car. So what do you think of this review? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching and stay safe, everyone.